Thank you all so much for joining us today. And thank you especially to Brian Bonde for being so willing to jump on and share all of his wealth of experience and knowledge with the assembled group today.
Thanks, Andrew. It's great to be here.
My name is Andrew Reinertz with Arts South Dakota, and we'll be turning it over to Brian in just a second here. But first, wanted to just say a quick thank you to some of our partners who have been able to make this happen. Chief among them, the South Dakota Arts Council, Bush Foundation, and then Arts Midwest. We're really excited to have Art Midwest's help with today's session, and I know that Tori Allen, their new executive director, is able to jump on and will be involved in some Q&A later on in the session, and we're really excited to have him involved. Brian is on their board, as well as about 72 other boards, and so it's great to have,
I'm a professional board member. That's right.
Yeah, great to have them all involved. Today, what we're going to try to do for the question process is you'll see down at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A button. And I would like us to try to use that for any questions that we have during the course of the meeting today. Then I can communicate those questions to Brian, and during the appropriate Q&A section, address any questions that any of you have. And then the chat function, please feel free to use that to communicate with the rest of the attendees, or to just ask process questions or technical questions beyond questions for our presenter today. So as everyone knows, we're dealing with a number of challenges as we face the current health crisis. And we're really excited to have Brian join us to talk through a little bit of that today. But to help us set the set the stage for that, we'd like to ask just a couple of really quick questions of the assembled group through the poll functionality. So I'm going to launch that right now, and those of you that are attendees should see, it's just what is your role and where are you from, essentially, just so we can get a little bit of an idea of the group that is assembled. So if you could please take a moment to answer that poll for us, and we'll get started in just a moment.
Well, while I'm on, all right, Andrew, can you hear me?
Correct.
Well, while we're waiting, I just want to say thanks to everybody who came online. We have 60 participants, which is really exciting. I'm very pleased about that. And we'll try to keep track, Andrew and I, on what's going on with the Q&A. I've got a couple different things on my screen. I've got one here. People say they don't see the poll. Where do they get to the poll, Andrew?
Trying to relaunch that just to make sure.
There we go. I see it now. Thank you, Nancy, for sharing that. So we've got two questions. Trying to get the idea of what's your role in the organization or the community. Just check. Executive, CEO, fundraising staff, other staff, board members, volunteers, individual artist, arts supporter, advocate, or other. I know we're really focusing on the arts community today, but I know there's some other people, my clients, and some other people who may have jumped on today. And then also the second question is what's your geography? We've got a number of areas around South Dakota you can check, North Dakota, Minnesota, or the other Arts Midwest states, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Michigan, Ohio, Wisconsin, or if you're from somewhere else, feel free to do that. Are we getting some poll responses? Can you see, Andrew?
Yes, we're starting to get just about 60% of the people have responded so far.
Okay, good. So much of this functionality is all new to us, so we're all trying to get used to it. So I'm going to give you a little introduction about me. Can I go ahead and share my screen, Andrew?
1 second. Let me do this. It looks like the poll has ended, so let me just really quick share that with you, Brian, so you can see.
Oh, nice. Yeah, we've got 65 participants right now. 37% are executives or CEOs. We've got 19% are fundraising staff. We've got 6% other staff. We've got 19% board members. That's great to have board members on. Volunteers, individual artists. We've got 2% individual artists and 6% volunteers, 4% art supporters, and 8% other. And then looking at our geography, most people are from southeastern South Dakota, about half of them, 19% in Northeast South Dakota, Central South Dakota 2%, Western South Dakota 19%. We've got 2% from Minnesota. We've got 2% from other Arch Midwest states and 6% from other areas around the country. So thank you very much for that. That's cool. I love that functionality and try to get everybody engaged a little bit. Well, what's next, Andrew? Should I take over?
Yep, go right ahead.
Okay, I'm going to try to share my screen here and go into my PowerPoint slides. Now, Andrew, you got to guide me. Can you see my title slide up there?
Yes.
Okay, great. Just a little bit about myself. I don't want to spend too much time on this because we want to get into the content, but I'm Brian Bonde. I am from Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and I am a consultant. I've been doing consulting work for 8 years, but I've got a long experience in fundraising. I've been doing this for almost 30 years. For a while, I was the vice president of development at Augustana University. I was at what was Children's Care Hospital and School and now is LifeScape, and was president of that foundation. I moved from there to Sanford Health and was a vice president there in their foundation doing their national and international fundraising, and then became a consultant about 8 years ago. Sanford became my first client, and so I started my company with them, and I've worked with numerous nonprofit organizations around the country since then. And you can see my theme there, working with people that desire to lead great organizations and raise more money. Now let's see if we can get my slides to move forward. Perfect. I carry the Advanced Certified Fundraising Executive Certification. That is the highest certification in fundraising. There are about 3,000 certified fundraising executives, and there are a little over 100 of us that carry the Advanced Certified Fundraising certification. I only say that so that those people who don't know me know why I'm doing this and what expertise I may have and why I may be doing this. So if you want to take a screenshot, I don't know if you're on your phone, or I'll show this a little bit later. If there's any reason you want to get in touch with me, I'll be glad to talk to you about your organization or any concerns that you have. And this is how you get in touch with me. Andrew also spoke about our sponsors. I want to say a special thanks to Arch South Dakota and to Arch Midwest for making this all possible. Nobody's making any money off of this today, and I appreciate Arch Midwest and Arch South Dakota giving their resources to get this on the air. And I'm volunteering to do this simply because I think we all have to work together in this time of crisis. And I have just come off a week of working with the Association of Fundraising Professionals and their international conference. So I've been in touch with a lot of other consultants, a lot of fundraisers around the world, and have a lot of good information I hope I can share with you today. So let's get into the heart of our conversation today. We've moved into this new abnormal situation, and we're hearing all this language about we've got to keep our social distance. I don't like that much. I like the idea of keeping our physical distance, but we need to be socially connected. And that means getting used to the technology quickly and using it as much as you can. I have a train on the screen because for me, being in South Dakota, I feel a little like I was driving across the prairie on a highway going just really smooth. And all of a sudden this train came along, and it came on fast, and we don't know how many cars it's going to have. And we're first of all just sat there for a minute to see if it would pass, but we don't have time to stall, and we've got to get to work, adapt quickly to this temporary new world. And the worst thing we can do in our nonprofit organizations is do nothing. So I've had a lot of people say in the last couple of weeks, oh, I'm home, I'm bored, and I can't imagine how anybody who's working for a nonprofit can be bored. We need to be leaders. We need to do what we can do to get into a leadership frame of mind. So we have to get grounded, and we have to communicate more to our supporters and to our donors than we ever have, not less. One of the things that I keep hearing is people think it might be insensitive to be communicating with our donors and supporters at this time, and I'd say it's exactly the opposite. One of the things that we can't do as fundraisers and then our nonprofit organizations is to assume anything about our donors. I work with so many groups, and oftentimes organizations don't know anywhere enough about their donors. And so it's not insensitive to communicate. You can't assume that people won't give in this environment. Just like in any other environment, people will manage their pockets and their purses and their wallets just as they would in normal times. Our job is to tell the story about our organizations. We don't want to deny our supporters the joy of giving. And I think in this time where so many of us are feeling concerned, worried, sometimes even helpless, the opportunity to give and know you're making a difference to an organization, and supporting your organization and giving the donors the opportunity to experience the joy of giving is critical. Because our organizations are wondering, our donors are wondering how their favorite organization is doing, and they want to know how they can help. So let's move on to the next step, and that is, first of all, we got to get ourselves prepared. We need to take good care of ourselves. You've probably heard some of this. I think about it a little bit like going on an airplane. And all of you have heard that speech that the flight attendant gives us about when you get in trouble, you put your own oxygen mask first. So only then can you help others. So I think one of the first things that we need to do is to get ourselves personally grounded, get calm before you communicate with your donors. I think all of us have had emotional reactions in this situation we're in. Go outside, do that, go somewhere else, do that, get yourself in order, and then get connected with your donors. And do the things that you know are right for you. Good food, good sleep, good distractions. Be careful about self-medicating. I know all the ice cream in my house is now gone because I've eaten it all. And maybe you're having some of the same thing. And be careful about the cocktails and other things that can take care of us. Set personal objectives for yourself. Inside the obligations and the constraints that you have, figure out what you want to do today, tomorrow, and this week for your organization. The other thing is to minimize worry. That's easier said than done. But one of the things I've discovered, I'm a news junkie. I want a shout out to my favorite station, South Dakota Public Broadcasting, for giving me this mug. But I normally check in on the news about 18 times a day. Now I'm doing it maybe a couple times a day, and maybe 15 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes at night, because I need, for my own self, I know I've got to control the panic makers. So limiting news, Twitter, Facebook, and learning what I need to know about what's going on in the world about 30 minutes a day so it doesn't suck me down. And then doing those other things we need to do to stay centered. Work, learn something, read, exercise, and then allow yourself some time to compress every day. And that means maybe taking a walk and doing what you need to do at some point in the day for yourself. I want to talk a little bit. Many of you have started to adapt or have adapted this whole situation of working at home. I have been doing this now for 8 years, and I have to admit it was a adjustment when I first started, and I'm sure you're going through the same sort of adjustment yourself. Try to follow your regular workday routine, your weekday routine. Do the same things you did when you were working. Get up at the same time, take a shower, get out of the jammies. I know that's going to be hard. And then get online just like you're at work. One of the things that's helpful for me is to put on my uniform. That's this, whatever your uniform is, whatever you're comfortable in, whatever your costume is. I guarantee it'll change your attitude. And then also when we're getting on videos as much as we are, it also shows some respect for your coworkers. I've been on calls this last week where, it's obvious somebody just got out of bed, or they are still in their jammies. And if you have your jammy bottoms on, that's okay. You have your professional clothes on top. Get used to the technology. Zoom, Skype, Microsoft Teams, whatever your office standard is. If you have a separate camera and a separate microphone, they do. I've been doing these webinars for the Association of Fundraising Professionals, and they sent me, a giant professional microphone that I'm using, and I've got a very nice camera. Luckily, they're supplying that for me for a little while, but I also got the other stuff. If you've got it, hook it up, because the separate mic works better, or use your iPhone headphones or something like that. The other thing is find a separate workspace, if you can, in your house or your apartment, so you can separate what's work and what's not work. I know, having worked from home as long as I have, it's easy to not have any space for yourself or time for yourself, and you can get completely sucked into your work. And some of us type A people have a problem with that. But if it's difficult for you to get to work, set yourself up a place to work and go to work at the same time and come home at the same time and get out of that space. Be creative with your art and your technology. There's so many artists online here, and there's so many great ways to express your art through the new technology. I've been watching great videos from great artists, even visual artists have been putting things up, and there are creative ways to use this technology to express yourself and to express your art. If you can manage distractions, you will find that you can be more productive at home than you can at work. I've discovered that I was able to do 8 hours of work in 4 to 6 hours once I got home, because I didn't have all the other distractions that were in the office. And those of you who are fundraisers, there's many opportunities to do a lot of things you haven't gotten done. Get on the internet and evaluate your donors. Find out what you can about them. Spend some time cleaning up your database. Scour your website and go back and update it and find those things that need to be changed. Are you writing personal notes to each one of your donors? Are you making phone calls? And we'll be talking a lot more about that. Andrew, I'm going to pause there for just a second. Do we have any questions at this point, or should I continue on?
So far, there are no additional questions, but please, everyone, feel free to use the Q&A section and send in your questions anytime.
And you can see that at the bottom of your screen. If you go towards the bottom of the screen, Zoom will pop up a little panel there, and you can see all of the options that you've got. I was going to play around with all of my various goofy backgrounds, but I thought, no, I'll keep it serious today. Well, let's move on. What should we be doing right now as an organization? I have some travel metaphors I'm using today, and this one involves sailing. And you know, when you go sailing and the wind goes wrong, the first thing you do is you grab the rope so you can hang on tight and so you don't fall off the boat. And then the other thing is you figure out how to set the sails. And I think what our organizations need to do at this critical time is to do an assessment. Take stock of what your immediate financial needs are, and also take stock of the morale and the spirit of the organization and your staff. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, but by doing this assessment and understanding what's going on with all of your people, what's going on with the organization, especially financially, this will become your new temporary case of support. And when I talk about a case of support, is what are those reasons that our donors care about us? It's understanding a little bit of the history. It's knowing exactly what your needs are right now and what will solve those needs. And that means taking stock. This is a great way to connect with some of your board members and come up with a continuity plan. The only thing that's certain in this situation is uncertainty. And so we need to come up with multiple scenarios as to where we're at. What are we going to need to keep going this week? What are we going to need? What are we going to need to keep going for the next month? What are we going to need to keep going through the next 3 months? Because we will come out of this. But I was talking, Janet Brown and I were texting back and forth earlier, and we were talking about resources. And the first thing we have to do is make sure that we as individuals, as artists, as organizations, as nonprofit organizations, is that we don't sink into the sea and disappear. We've got to get through this short-term period, which is going to be tough, so that we have our mission continuing when this is all over. So take a close look at what you need to get through these next 3 months. What are your real cash needs for the next 90 to 180 days? Do you have what you need? Do you need to raise what you need? Do you have immediate capital needs? Are there things that you can defer as far as your building and other things for a little while? But try to come up with numbers. You need to be ready for the questions that your donors and supporters are going to ask you. People are passionate about your mission. You need to explain your needs and tell them how you're going to make sure that you're going to get through this, and what impact you can have. Think about how you are impacting the COVID crisis, first of all. Are you an organization that has immediate impact? If you're an arts group, not only can you help raise spirits of people now, but more importantly, raise the spirits of people once this is over. And we're all going to need that personal, intellectual, and creative healing that only artists and our arts organizations are going to be providing. So think about the message that you need to provide to your donors so you can get through this period of time. An important part of that is keeping your mission up front. I mean, the first thing that people start talking about is money. Well, even in this situation, people are concerned about your mission more than your money, but they need to know that you keep your mission at the forefront. I have to do a little self-serving promotion. This is the Sioux Empire Community Playhouse production of Les Miserables. And so this is the only time I'm putting myself in a slide. So if you recognize some of the people in that slide, that's why. What is your mission? It's what your organization does. And what does your mission do, like I said, to impact this particular crisis? And collect your COVID-19 stories, as I call them. There are ways that our organizations are impacting people right now. And even if it gets emotional, that's okay. One of the things about this period of time, we've come more informal, and we've also become a lot more real, because that's just how it has to be. So don't blow smoke for your supporters. Tell them how you are supporting your regular constituency base. Tell them how the situation is with your staff. Tell people how you're supporting your staff. And when it comes to communication, talk mission first. Here's what we do. Here's how we make an impact. Here's how we're helping now. Here's how we're going to help in the future, and make money second. And be an empathetic leader. Everybody's suffering, and your donors are suffering too. So be transparent and be honest, and just admit these are crazy times and we need your help more than ever. I'm going to take a short break here, Andrew, and ask again if there are any questions. I see there's some things coming in. It's hard for me to look at all the various things I got in front of me. So I don't know if there are any questions we want to address, Andrew, or should I keep moving forward?
There's some good questions coming in, but I think we can keep moving forward. I have a feeling a couple of them may be addressed by your coming remarks, and then we can go from there.
Okay, that sounds great. Well, so how do we do this communication we need to do? How do we talk to our donors, our boards, and our volunteers? And our donors are our organizational family, and we need to support each other as family. Many of your best supporters right now are socially isolated, and they will love to hear from you. Plus, the other thing that I'm finding from people I talk to around the country is people are home, and people are actually picking up the phone. Those of you who are active fundraisers realize that it's often hard to get a hold of somebody. The other thing is that we can gather some good information and data on our supporters during this period of time, because if we have an email, we can email them and ask for their cell phone number, and then you can make a call, or vice versa. When you're on the call, say, give me your email address so I can keep you up to date, and some of those things that will help build your data. The question is, who do you call? Now I'll see if my animations even work. Look at that. Like a capital campaign, you want to go top down and inside out. So the pyramid I have on the screen, if you're not a fundraiser, you haven't seen that. But let me see. Are you seeing my arrow on there, Andrew?
Yes.
On the screen? Okay. So when our prospects or suspects come into our organization, they usually start down here and they make an annual gift. or they make their first gift, and then it moves up to an annual gift. They make gifts on a regular basis, and then ultimately they'll move up to make a major gift, a planned gift. And what we want to do is we want to go to the very top of this pyramid. Who are our very best donors? And we want to figure out who they are. So go to the top with your best donors, and then the next thing is to go to the inside. We want to talk top down to our very best donors, and then we want to be inside out and talk to our boards and our volunteers. And then go down through your database list through all your other donors. This is also a good way to engage your board, your volunteers, and senior staff. Once you've strategized, figure out who each one of those people have the best relationships with, get the phone numbers and contact information, and get out and talk to your key constituents. And when I say talk to, in this world, that could be video, that could be a regular phone call, that could be texting, that could be emailing, it could be Twittering, it could be all sorts of things. And you're going to need to figure out what's the best way to communicate to your particular donors. So we talked about who to call. Now, how do you do it? Not all of us are comfortable with that. But again, this is an informal time. Everybody, I think for the first time maybe in the history of the world, we're all in the same boat all the way around the world. So just give people a call and first ask the question, how are you doing? What's going on with you? What's going on with your family? And then listen well. I mean, this is the heart of stewardship. And if you just have a conversation as to how they're doing, and that's where the conversation ends, that's great. You've developed that relationship with you and with the organization and the supporter. Donors have a lot on their troubled minds. But just like you, they still care about your mission. So don't forget to tell them that because of what you have done, we're able to be here and we're going to make it through. And then the next thing is after you've listened to what's going on with them, say, here's what we're doing. And that assessment and plan that I talked about earlier, this is the time to talk about it. Tell them what's going on. You know, be transparent. We're all concerned, even scared, and this is a challenge. We're on a race with an unknown finish line. Acknowledge that. And then maybe, just maybe, they might say, what can I do to help? What can I do to help the symphony? Or what can I do to help the playhouse? Or what can I do to help you as an individual visual artist? What can I do for the hospital? What can I do for the university? And if that question comes up, the door's open. And don't be afraid to ask. Ask if you need it and explain why. If the door doesn't open, if the donor doesn't say that thing of, how can I help? Use your own instincts, whether you should ask or not. But talk about your mission. They still believe in what you do. They give because of the mission. They support because of your mission. And they don't need and probably don't want anything in return. I think especially those of us like me, I've got my own little theater company who are used to transactional relationships. You know, you give me the money, I'll give you the ticket, you know, or you give me the money and I'll give you a mug. I still like my mug. Thanks for giving it to me. But people don't care about mugs right now. They care that your mission's going to be safe, that the organization is going to survive. And just give them the information they want, have a true, real conversation, and see if there's an opportunity to talk about support. If there's not, move on. Don't forget to ask if people have a donor advised fund. One of the things that happened with the tax bill a couple years ago is that a lot of people put money into their donor advised funds and they've got money available there to give out. And if people have that donor advised fund in a community foundation, that's an opportunity. If they're a planned giving donor, if you know that they have you in their will or their estate plan, this is a great time to steward them and to become better friends with them. probably an older donor, maybe isolated. If you're one of the warm voices that they're hearing, they're going to remember that later. The other thing in that case is if you can give help, do it. I don't know if Dennis is watching today, but I have a client that I work with, and he's in a senior care center, and he's found a way that when they drop the groceries off at the front desk, he takes the precautions, that he takes the bag up to their room and leaves it outside the room, and then goes back to his office and calls them and says, your bag is there and there's an opportunity for some conversation. Our supporters will remember that kind of stuff. And the other thing is you might be able to be a connector. A lot of people still don't know. I was on a family call last night, and people are still learning how to use video. People don't know, how to do FaceTime or House Party or Skype. They don't know how to use Zoom, and you can help people with that and walk them through that. And then that will also give you a way to communicate, but you'll also be remembered when they're able to connect with their family and connect with other people they wouldn't otherwise. I'll go back to Andrew. Anything else that we need to do here? I see things popping up, but I'm not able to read them. And I don't know if there's anything else. Should we go just keep moving forward and take some questions later, or do we want to address some things now?
Yeah, I think that we'll keep moving. Looking at your outline, I still think a couple of these questions maybe hit later, and then we'll have some good open Q&A a little bit later on in the session.
Okay, that sounds good. For those of you who are artists, both Jim Spears and Tori will be on to answer some of your questions specifically about our South Dakota, about South Dakota Arts Council, about Arts Midwest, and some other specific arts questions. We'll do that toward the end. Now, one of the harder things to do in this situation is sort of like with your stock portfolio, if you have one, or your 401k or anything, is staying the course. You want to stay on course with your philanthropic plans, with your development plans, with your fundraising program plans. This is not the time, if at all possible, to pull back on your plans, to pull back on your staff, or to pull back on your effort. Because this too, as scary as this seems, will pass for most of us. And I wanted to just show you this chart. In past financial crises, there's been a lot of them that I've lived through as a fundraiser. Back in '87, when the economy slumped, there was the .com problem, there was 9/11, there was what happened in 2008. Nonprofit organizations who have stayed the course have thrived when we got things back to normal. Now, I know this is different. We've never been through this before, but this example that I have on the screen, if you'll look at the top line, this is what was going on with philanthropy through the 2008 recession. And you can see what happened to the stock market. And we even had a little blip up in giving right here during that recession. And things as far as giving are more flat than they are with the market. And so once again, you can't make assumptions about what your donors can or can't do. That's not your job. Your job is to tell the story. They'll manage their pocketbooks. And if they're able to help, they will help because they do care about your organization. Practice stewardship. Like I said, thank people, talk to people, if for no other reason than to simply strengthen the relationship. Keep doing the philanthropic work and the relationship building that you need to be doing. It's challenging to trust your heart when your brain keeps saying, pull back. But it's important to have strong data, do your assessments, know what your needs are, know what your numbers are. But people don't make giving decisions because of the numbers. They make decisions because of their heart. And you want to touch their heart. And once they make a decision that they want to be a supporter, then they will go to the other side of their brain and think about how much it's going to be. In the same way, you need to listen to your emotions, control them, and make good business decisions. And that means staying the course so that you are in good shape when we come out of this. We will come out of this. This is going to be tougher than what we've done before. But if we have real problems, we should be talking to our best donors. I was working with a consultant out of North Carolina, well-known author. Well, I won't put any names to it, but she was talking about one of her clients who was an arts organization, and about 2 weeks ago, maybe 10 days ago, they panicked. They shut down the organization. They fired everybody, and my consultant friend intervened with them and reminded them that during their capital campaign, they had a angel donor who was very generous through their campaign. And she said, why don't we go back and talk to her and see if she'd help? And she was willing to support the staff for a 3-month period. So the staff came back, they got their jobs back, they're back to work, and they're moving forward. But it takes some creative thinking, and it takes not panicking and staying the course with where we're headed. Let's talk a little bit about events. I mean, many of us on this call rely on gathering of people for our revenue streams. And we all know we can't gather people. So what about our events? It's going to be tough. There's just no way around it. But start looking for other ideas. Start thinking online, looking online for other resources. Right now, my suggestion is not to reschedule your event, but go back out to your people who were supporting your event and ask for a special gift for your non-event. Go directly back to your past donors, because they still love you, they still care. They were part of the event because they loved you and they wanted to support you. And put some staff on and volunteers on individual calls to all those supporters of your events. Another thing you can do is, like I said before, look and see if you can find a major donor. And I'm talking about a significant donor who can fill the gap. If you have an event that raised $10,000, you may be able to find that one singular donor who's willing to put up $10,000 just to get you through this. The other thing is, don't assume that people are going to want their money back. Use the opportunity to build the relationship, talk to them, and ask them what they want to do. You need to offer refunds, but you also need to ask if they're willing to donate to help you through the crisis. And maybe they will let you keep the money. But if they want their money back, you got to give it to them, because you don't want to damage the relationship. You want to be able to have them come to next year's event, because we're going to have one, I'll guarantee it. And then the other thing is maybe you can replace some of your income with a direct mail, email, social media campaign. I see so many people who do a one media campaign, and in today's world, we have to do a multi-channel campaign. But I think all of us have the ability to do that. You can do a direct mail on a theme and put that same information on your website, get it out on Facebook. You can have your CEO do a video on your phone, have your CEO talk about what's going on, and then put that up and put that out on Facebook or on your website or on Twitter or whatever social media you use. So consider doing a mini campaign for a particular purpose, for a particular amount, with a particular segment of your group. Well, let's talk about the CARE Act. Most of you know that last Friday.
Sorry to jump in.
Okay.
Actually, a couple of the questions that came up were related to events, and so I thought this might be a good chance to quick answer those, if that's okay.
Yeah, let's do it. We'll see if we can answer them.
So one question was from Gail, who asked, what guidance do you have for handling ticket sales if the fundraiser has to be canceled? Do you refund the ticket sales, or do you request them to give it as a donation? You kind of addressed that, but do you have any additional suggestions there?
Well, one of the things about events like that is for lack of a better way to say this, they're sometimes faceless. We sell tickets, people come in, they leave. We may not have a personal connection with them. You've got a little bit of time. If you know who bought the ticket, if you've got information to contact them, use it as a way to build the relationship with the organization by having some personal contact with them. Even if it's just an email or a text or something, at least it's an interpersonal connection. Just don't give the money back. Give them an opportunity to donate it. And if they want the money, like I said, if they want it back, give it to them. But you don't just, I'll give you an example. If this was a big sporting event, like my son and I were going to go down to the Nebraska spring game here in another couple weeks. Well, there's 50,000 tickets. That was not a charitable thing per se, and they just automatically refunded our tickets back onto our credit cards. Most of us in the arts community are not in that situation. It's not a big mass deal. These are people that are regular people who come back and forth to us. It's a charitable support of the arts. So try to connect with them and do like I said. Ask them if they'll give the money, and if they want it back, give it to them. Andrew, is there another one?
To follow up on that, then Milt is asking, what about if the event is rescheduled? Obviously, you still have that income coming in, but that will shift, I could imagine, when the cash flow hits. Do you have any suggestions on reaching out to your donors and how to handle rescheduling an event like that?
Yeah, I do the same thing. I mean, if you are going to be scheduling far enough out that there's a pretty good chance that's going to happen, then just hold the money and say, we're going to hold this for the rescheduled event. And then when that comes, we'll give you a ticket. I've got, for those of you in Sioux Falls, I bought tickets for Leo Kotke, and Leo Kotke got sick and couldn't be here. I don't remember when that was, sometime in the last couple months. And then now we're not going to have it because of this. They still have my ticket and my money, and I still would like to see Leo if that ever happens. But you kind of have to. One of the dangers there is that if you have an event like that, you got to be careful about spending the money. So be sure that you're isolating some of those funds for those people who do want their money back. When I'm talking about events like I was talking about here, I was primarily talking about fundraising events, and I think it's going to be a bigger challenge for those of us who run theaters and symphonies and other organizations when it comes to ticket sales. But even with that, I think many people understand the situation that we're in, and they believe in our organization. They want to do what's good for us. So at least ask them if you can hold on to the money.
Great. Thanks, Brian. I think we can move forward. The questions that everyone have been submitting are great. And I think the ones left so far, we will address with kind of the panel discussion at the end.
Okay, that sounds great. Let's talk about the CARE Act. What that means, I'm always amazed at how Washington comes up with acronyms, but it's the Corona Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, which was passed on Friday. There are all these other components of that you may be hearing about: the employee retention payroll tax credit, the economic injury disaster loans, refundable employee retention credit, paycheck protection program, Family First Corona Response Act. I mean, there's a lot to learn. If you would like, I have done a summary of what I think is the most important things about the CARE Act, and I don't know if you can see that. But there are a number of things, and I'm not going to go through them all here today. There's a lot of resources online because this just happened on Friday, and Congress is trying to get their act and all of the agencies that are going to implement this. I noticed when I was online on Monday to the governmental agencies, and then when I finished this again yesterday, a lot of the websites that I was using on Monday have now changed. And I know that for some of the loans, the publicity has said you should be going to your local bank and talking to them. And I've been talking with some of the local bankers around the state and the region, and a lot of them don't have that information, and they're supposed to have it tomorrow. So this is all happening very fast. But there are loans that are available from the Small Business Administration. Some of them are may even turn into grants if you do this right and you keep people employed. There's been lifts of limits on the deductions for itemizers. There are refundable tax credits to nonprofits. We're all going to be getting, if you're under 75,000 for an individual, or 150,000 a year for a couple. Actually, that number's higher than that now. They've changed that. They're going to be getting some checks, and you may have some donors who are going to get through this fine. They're going to get that check, and they may even be interested in sharing that with you. That might be a conversation to have. And there are a lot of other provisions that could be helpful. So I'm not going to spend a lot more time on the CARE Act, but if you will send your email or drop your email into the chat box, we'll get this to you. And some other information too. I think as much as you can tell us who you are through the chat box, and I don't know, Andrew, is there another way for people to tell us who's on if they want more information from any of us?
Yeah, I think that actually we found that if you're registered with Zoom, I might be able to get to your email address. Otherwise, please drop it in the chat. And if you would like, you can send it to just all panelists so that it doesn't get shared if you don't want it to be shared with your fellow attendees.
If you want to get in touch with me, or if you want to share this with me and I can get it to Andrew, we'll figure this all out. But my work email is just Brian, B-R-I-A-N, Brian at Brian Bonde, BrianBonde.com. So Brian at BrianBonde.com, and we can get through that.
And I did share that again in the chat, and we'll have it up on a slide at the end as well.
Okay. Just a couple more things. I think this is the moment and the time to build trust and to do good. I think it's an opportunity when we can really build great trust with our donors and our supporters, or we could destroy it. So take the time, be truthful about our situation. Even if it's not pretty, acknowledge the crisis, facilitate the communication your donor wants. If your donor wants to talk to your CEO, figure out how you can make that happen. Keep the gratitude coming. Thank them for all they've done. Don't tell any untruths. Don't blow smoke. Be as real as you possibly can be. One of the things to remember about philanthropy, and philanthropy in the United States especially, is it comes from the heart of civil society. I mean, even out here on the prairie, if somebody wanted to build a church, somebody wanted to build a theater, somebody wanted to have a symphony hall, somebody wanted to build a hospital, you don't do it on your own. We've come together as community to do these things for generations. That's how America was built, especially how it was built for those of us who live on the prairie. We built it together. That spirit's still alive, and we can get through that and try to keep a good attitude. The last thing I would say is to try to be the best you can in this situation. This is going to be tough. We've got to take some deep breaths before we communicate with our donors. Alice Ferris is a friend of mine. She and I were on a national webinar with the Association of Fundraising Professionals this week. And on her computer screen, she had this last line here: done is better than perfect. I know that I like to be perfect. I like to be prepared, and I like to be ready to go. But the fact is, in this situation, there's only so much we can do, and it's better to do it than to make sure it's perfect before it happens, because all of our donors and all of us understand. And the most important thing to do is just to take that first step and to get out there and to communicate with your donors what your needs and your thoughts are. So with that, we're about 50 minutes into this, and we want some time to do a panel discussion. Again, I want to thank everybody at the staff of Arts South Dakota. Jim, Andrew, Sherry, thank you for all you've done to make this possible and the work you're doing. At Arts Midwest, thanks to Tori and to Ann for what you're doing. I also want to thank AFP Global and AFP South Dakota, because much of this information has come from my experiences through AFP that I've been sharing with you. Once again, I'm Brian Bonde, and if you want to get in touch with me, here's the information. And I think with that, Andrew, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and send it back to you, and we can go into a bit of a panel discussion with our arts experts.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again, Brian. Before I open it up for a couple of questions, I just wanted to say that while our arts organizations are definitely going to be struggling, so many of us operate so close to the bone to begin with. I think that the thing for us all to keep in mind, and one thing I really got from your presentation, is to continue to be creative. You know, the one thing that we are the best at is creative thinking and creative problem solving. And if we can remember to apply that type of thinking to the work we're doing as we're doing this emergency response, then I think that we'll be able to set ourselves up for later success. So a couple of other questions that maybe some of the other panelists might be able to jump in on as well is Leah asked a question. They're a performing arts company, and they're using live stream, some video content, and some curriculum assets. And they're wondering how best to share these with other presenters that they know. They're a performing arts company. Their goal is to help keep some of these performing art companies visible, you know, and serving the community even when they can't be performing. So they're just wondering how other presenters or how we might recommend people utilize resources like this to serve the community, and if they're integrating any of those types of assets to help fundraise. That was a long question, but I hope the point got across.
Well, I'll moderate a little bit here. I want to again thank Tori Allen, who is the CEO of Arts Midwest, and I want to thank Jim Spears, who is the CEO of Arts South Dakota. And I'll turn it over to the two of you to have a little discussion about that question. You just went on mute, Tori.
Jim,
there we go.
I see you, Tori. Now I can hear you.
No, you're muted again, Tori. That little there you go. All right.
Okay. Thanks.
There you go.
So,
go ahead,
Jim,
Tori.
I know I was going to turn it over to you. I think maybe you might have a better idea of what's happening locally.
Yes. Well, locally here in South Dakota, we're trying to gather a lot of these stories. So, Leah, I think that's something, if you'd be willing to share the work you're doing with Arts South Dakota. One of our ongoing programs and communications pieces is a weekly newsletter. And what we found is we're shifting the focus of that newsletter from sharing live events and information about community arts events. And now we're talking about virtual arts events and different resources that we can put into play for our sector. So if you have a story to share, let us know about that. We'd be glad to get it out. The other thing that I've been just as we've always done is just, especially in South Dakota, reach out to people you know. We still live in a state that we're really fortunate that we kind of virtually know everyone across the state. So I think it's a matter of sometimes, as Brian said in his presentation, jump on the phone, reach out to people you do know, and start to network that way. And I think you'd be surprised in South Dakota how quickly you start to make those connections.
I know a couple of other ideas that I've seen locally from some performing groups, whether it be the symphonies or theater groups. A number of them are doing virtual ticketed performances, so they're either opening up their back catalog of existing assets as kind of for a limited cost ticket as a fundraiser. So there are ways to use those to push out to people, but still provide a service, but have a little bit of fundraising revenue coming in, as well as just trying to open up as much of your back catalog as possible for free, just to remain in front of people and to make sure people remember the good work you do when you're able to get back to work.
Yeah, I have nothing more to add to that, except I think I really want to lean into what Brian had talked about earlier, and that is, this is the time to lead with your mission and your values. Don't think about the money, think about leading with your values, and trust that by going in that direction, that's going to be more magnetic for capital than the hard asks.
Great. Thanks. And for anyone that's interested, Leah did reach out in the chat that she is integrating some curriculum for schools into their school shows and some different work, and she's willing to connect with anyone that is wondering what they're up to. So please feel free to connect with her via the chat if you'd like to talk more. Another question, speaking a little bit then off that, is just an anonymous person asked, does anyone have any ideas on the fundamental challenges of academic settings, whether it be schools or art schools, especially with morale between teachers and students, along with continuing to message to the public and media?
Yeah, that's.
Well, I think so much of that is keeping the communication going. I think so much of what is going on as far as morale is what can we do to create a little bit of normalcy, and that's, again, like you said, Andrew, how can we be creative in that regard? I look at the relationships of teachers and students, at least among elementary students. I think about the impact that these little drive-arounds that teachers have had to go around and connect with their students. I see signs in the windows. I see all of those sorts of things. So much of it gets down to, are we communicating? Now, that means being creative. That means using the tools we have in order to do that in this time. Now, we're not used to picking up the phone. And I think that is a brand new tool that we're going to rediscover all over again. It's real easy to make that call and to make some connections. I know my generation still uses the phone. There are younger generations that don't use this phone the same way we did, but there are opportunities in other ways. Are you texting? Are you Snapchatting? Are you TikToking? Whatever it may be, in order to build that communication. I think there's going to be real challenges in the university and education settings, but can we find creative ways to communicate? One of the things I keep hearing too that people are saying is, we're going to come out of this with a whole new set of communication strategies, because all of a sudden we are finding that we don't have to travel across the country because we actually can communicate like we're communicating today. I don't know, Tori or Jim, any other thoughts?
I think a lot about using this opportunity to explore what does it mean to be a creative communicator. And for me, what keeps popping up is gamifying the concept. How can you make it exciting and fun and different and unusual, and to really explore what that means? I think communications offers so much. There's so much there, and there's so many different ways to communicate. So I would just say be as creative as possible with this concept, and lean into gamification. Gamify the communications.
Yeah,
come up with clever new ways to connect with folks.
And don't be scared to try something either. That's one thing that I have to teach myself with all this new technologies. You're going to try some things and it's maybe not going to work. You're going to have to learn some new skills, but don't be afraid of that. It's actually kind of fun to jump into some of these new apps and these new solutions to communicate.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of fun things, and I've seen even musicians who may be using Skype and their cell phone and their instrument to communicate or to create music remotely. I mean, there's some great things going on. I think about that even that benefit concert that you guys did, Jim, where you kept your distance, but you still made some creative connections with people through the jazz music.
And people are using animals and food, and they're coming together with these sort of virtual cocktails. I mean, I think there's a lot there that's unexplored.
Are there any other questions, Andrew?
Yeah, there's a good practical question from Nick Johnson, which just, Brian, do you or do any of the other panelists have any suggestions on how to word some of these appeals? As an arts organization, we've discussed we still can continue to fundraise, but just trying to remain sensitive to the many donors that are trying to do some direct support for food and shelter. And just if you have any kind of suggestions or recommendations there.
What comes to me right off for me is this is about jobs. job preservation, and this is about keeping the doors open, and that's universal. If there are folks in the community who are starting to prioritize the hospitals over the arts, that's reasonable and understandable. But I think sort of grounding the communications, and this is really about jobs, keeping jobs, and about keeping the doors open, and what that means for a community, all of the sectors of a community.
Yeah, I think, first of all, with the language, keep it real. I mean, we tend to oftentimes in fundraising copy what other people are doing or come up with language that isn't real. And then be very careful how you say it. Here's some samples that I picked up over the weekend at the AFP International Conference. And I love these quotes. While it's not ideal to be asking you right now many times throughout the year for support, I feel as a leader of this organization that I have the obligation to offer you the opportunity to invest in us again during this critical time. Let me say that again. While it's not ideal to be asking you many times throughout the year for support, I feel as the leader of this organization that I have the obligation to offer you the opportunity to invest in us again at this critical time. Do you see how that language is about, it's investing, it's offering, it's the joy of giving. It's not, we're in a mess and help us, please. Well, you know, you gotta measure that. Let me give you another example, like in a corporate setting. We can only imagine the decisions that you and your company must make during this time of crisis. What can we do to help you? If there are any opportunities for us to partner together now, we'd be more than willing to work with you as we have in the past. You see how the language works here again? I'll read it one more time. We can only imagine the decisions that you and your company must make during this time of crisis. What can we do to help you? If there are any opportunities for us to partner together now, we'd be more than willing to work with you as we have in the past. Here's an event one that I thought was excellent. For the safety and well-being of everybody in our community, we had to cancel our event. We would be so appreciative if you would consider allowing us to keep your event support at this critical time so that we may continue to serve our beneficiaries as best as we can. If you agree, kindly let us know by contacting us here or what we can do, or continuing that. I'll read it one more time. I just think it's so good. For the safety and well-being of everybody in our community, we had to cancel our event. We'd be so appreciative if you would consider allowing us to keep your event support at this time, at this critical time, so that we can continue to serve our beneficiaries as best we can. If you agree, kindly let us know. Something like that. It's a different way, a different way to handle it. So those are a couple,
Brian,
those are some of the language I thought was really helpful.
Brian, this is Jim. I just want to add, in just practical experiences here, we're finding that for our state arts conference that we were planning for May, that we're having to push out later in the year. Going back to people that have said they would support that conference, they have been absolutely understanding and supportive of moving that forward. So we're finding what you're saying is happening for us in real time here.
I see someone was asking for that language I was using. If you get Andrew or me your email address, I'll pull that stuff together. I don't have it in a digital form where I can just drop it into the chat section. But if you get it back to us, I will. I also I don't have the reference as to who that came from. That isn't my stuff, but it was just stuff that I had captured because I thought it was so good. And I'll find out the source and I will get that language to you. I think it's excellent.
And also for everyone to know, within about 24 hours, we'll have this session uploaded to artsouthdakota.org/webinars, which I'm posting in the chat now. And so you can also go back and pause and listen to any of the points that have been discussed so far. Does anyone else have any questions? There's nothing else coming through. Oh, the one thing I was going to say, Alana posted in the chat that I thought was really good is to keep in mind to don't worry about apologizing. you know, or don't apologize for the ask. Just make the ask. You know, I think that she mentioned, and I've felt this in myself during these times of crisis, it's really easy to say, we're sorry to be approaching you, but no, just go ahead, make your ask. They will give or they won't. You know, you won't be offending anyone by asking. And when you hedge like that, Brian, I think that you probably set yourself up for more failure.
Let me address that a little bit. I mean, part of that is changing your attitude. You are not getting into people's pockets. You're not stealing anything. What you are doing is you're telling people about the mission that they care about and that you care about, and giving them the opportunity to enjoy the joy of giving and supporting you and supporting the things that you love. One of the things about fundraising is the golden rule works every time. So when you have a question about how do you do that, think about an organization you really care about and how do you feel, and then apply that to the people that you're talking to. You're not getting in their pockets. You're asking for the people who can't to fulfill a mission that they believe in, that you believe in, your mutual friends, in the fact that you support your organization. So get out of the idea that this whole thing about that we're hitting somebody up, or we're getting into somebody's pockets, or we're begging, or that's not what this is. If that was what philanthropy and fundraising was about, I would have left this many years ago. I don't know. Tori, have you got anything to say about that? I remember some conversations you and I have had about that. So maybe you could share.
No, you seem to, I think you've summed it up perfectly, Brian. Thanks. Nothing to add. I'm right with you.
Great. Well, I just wanted to say thank you again to everyone, to Tori from Arts Midwest, to my fellow coworkers, Jim and Sherry, for joining us today, and especially to Brian for being so willing to share all of his wealth of experience and some great information. I'm just going to put up a slide now.
One other thing I'm going to say while you're doing that, Andrew,
yes,
is that I was involved on Sunday. Gail Perry and I, many of you know of Gail Perry. She wrote the book Fired Up Fundraising. Gail and I are good friends, and we did a webinar for the International Fundraising Virtual Conference on Sunday. And that prior to that was Sunday. On Friday, she and I did a taping of that session. We recorded it just in case the technology failed on Sunday when we did the webinar. I'm going to make that available privately. That's proprietary information that's actually owned by the Association of Fundraising Professionals. But I'm going to take that little video that I had, and I'm going to put it in a private YouTube channel. And if you are in the middle of a capital campaign and you're struggling with what to do next, email me directly, brian@brianbonde.com. It's on the screen there. And I will make that video available just to you. And I'll ask that you not share that because it's proprietary, but it's important information that we shared for those people who are anticipating, or in the middle of, or just completed a capital campaign. And hopefully that'll be helpful to you as well. Go ahead, Andrew.
Great. No, just thank you all so much again. Please reach out to us or to Brian directly at any time at the contact info here. We appreciate everyone being on today. And also, we're really trying to ramp up our efforts to have as many of these educational sessions as we can while we can't all get together. So if you have any ideas of burning questions, of topics you'd really like to discuss, please reach out to us as well. My email is andrew@artsouthdakota.org. And then also I wanted to mention that Jim Spears just posted in the chat, Art South Dakota has a running COVID-19 resources page that our communications director Sherry has been doing a fantastic job keeping up. So please look there for any information really specifically targeting artists and arts organizations. And thank you all so much.
Thank you, everybody. It was great to share with you today.